okay, think about this for a second. You're facing a really big decision. Maybe it's a major financial move, or getting a medical diagnosis, or maybe even just trusting a self driving car when things get a bit hairy on the road. Now, imagine the decision comes from an AI, just an answer, no explanation. It's like a black box, isn't it? And that leaves you thinking, well, how can I really trust this if I don't get how it arrived at that conclusion? All right, so let's get into that today. We're doing a deep dive into something that's just becoming so vital as AI kind of weaves itself into, well, everything. Explainable AI, .xai, and specifically how crucial it is for building trust. So our mission here is to pull out the key nuggets from the sources we've looked at. We've got research papers, insights from big players like IBM, Ericsson, McKinsey, plus analyses from 2023 looking at the 2025. The aim is for you to walk away really understanding the why AI makes the calls it does.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how the sources stress that trust in AI. It's not just about did it work, it's fundamentally tied to transparency, to understanding. They really frame XAI as not just a nice to have, but a necessity.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So at its heart, explainable AI, XAI, it's basically the methods, the processes that let us humans understand and then, trust what these machine learning systems are putting out. The whole point is to make AI systems transparent, interpretable, explainable, getting rid of that black box feeling, especially with things like deep learning.
And that idea of trustworthiness, it goes deeper than just does it function. It really digs into reliability, safety, and crucially ethical behavior, making sure these systems actually align with our values, that there's accountability.
Exactly. And our sources keep coming back to this. XAI is vital for trust, especially in these what they call high-stakes fields. Think healthcare. Understanding why an AI flags a certain diagnosis, that can be literally life-changing. Patients need to trust it, doctors need to verify it, or finance. If an AI turns down a loan, XAI can show the reasoning.
Right.
That builds fairness, reduces that feeling of distrust, and frankly, probably cuts down on legal headaches too.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, you see things like the EU AI Act actually starting to mandate explainability for high-risk systems. So it underlines how important this is for compliance, for ethics. It's becoming law, not just a suggestion.
And ethically speaking, the evidence seems pretty clear that XAI is a powerful tool for spotting bias in AI systems, which is obviously critical for fairness, for making sure the outcomes are skewed.
Yeah.
It's about making AI decisions not just accurate, but, just. It's really striking how the big industry names are all echoing this. IBM, for instance, they talk about XAI building confidence in what they call production AI, making it auditable, managing risks. Ericsson chimes in, noting how XAI helps with trustworthiness through transparency, even data transferability, privacy awareness, aligning with ethical guides.
Yeah, and McKinsey found something quite telling. They found, 40% of companies saw explainability as a key risk with AI.
40%, that's huge.
Right. But then only 17% were actually doing something concrete to mitigate that risk.
Wow. So there's a massive gap there between knowing it's a problem and actually tackling it.
Exactly. A real practical challenge for businesses right now. And the research absolutely backs this up. There was a 2023 Science Direct article reinforcing that XAI boosts trust simply by providing that clarity. It even proposed a 4-axis framework looking at data, the model itself, the post hoc explanation, and how it's assessed.
Okay.
Which is useful because it helps tailor the explanations. Different people need different levels of detail, legal teams, end users, developers.
That makes sense, because a technical explanation might mean nothing to a regular user. But what about the human side of trust? Does how you explain it matter?
Well, yeah, apparently it does. There's this experimental study, Wiley Online Library, I think. It looked at how different kinds of explanations affect user trust, depending on the risks involved and how well the AI was actually performing. So it suggests the impact of XAI isn't like one size fits all. It really depends on the context, which again highlights why it's so important for complex decisions. So we've established why it's so important, but how does XAI actually work? How does it peek inside that black box? Our sources mention a few approaches. For simpler AI, you might have things like decision trees or rule-based systems. These are often inherently transparent. You can sort of follow the logic.
Right, like a flowchart.
Exactly. But what about the really complex stuff, the deep neural networks? That seems like the real challenge. It is. And that's where you get these model-agnostic methods. Techniques like LIME or SAP. Zortify highlighted these. Think of it like this. You can't see inside the box, but you can poke it. You make tiny changes to the input and watch how the output changes.
Ah, okay.
These methods help figure out which inputs were most influential for that specific decision, even if you don't understand the whole internal structure. They kind of shine a spotlight on the key factors.
That's clever. And it's not just about user trust, is it? I saw Palo Alto Networks mention cybersecurity,
Yeah, that was interesting. XAI can help defend against some pretty nasty attacks. Things like model inversion.
where attackers try to steal the training data.
Exactly. Or content manipulation, where they subtly tweak inputs to trick the AI. If you understand why the AI is making a decision, it's easier to spot when something's off.
Right, helps you see anomalies.
And looking forward, say, to 2025, Algo Analytics points to work on interpretable deep learning. The goal there is to build these powerful deep learning models so they're more transparent from the get-go, ideally without losing accuracy. That's been the big trade-off historically.
The holy grail, almost.
Sort of, yeah. And Riveron expects more investment in these frameworks too, with companies like IBM really pushing collaborations.
But, okay, it sounds promising, but surely there are challenges. It can't be that easy.
No, definitely not. The number one hurdle, mentioned again and again in the sources, is just the sheer complexity of these advanced AI models, especially deep neural nets. Trying to explain their inner workings clearly is, well, it's really, really hard, like untangling spaghetti.
And then there's that performance issue we just touched on. That trade-off. Our sources confirm it's a real thing. Often, the simpler models that are easier to explain just don't perform as well as the complex, opaque ones.
So you might have to choose between top accuracy and clear explainability. Sometimes, yes. It raises this ongoing question. Can we ever get both perfectly balanced? Or is it always going to be a compromise we navigate?
And even if you can generate an explanation, making it actually useful is another challenge, right? You mentioned tailoring it earlier, making sure it's user relevant. Highly technical jargon isn't helpful for, say, a customer denied a loan.
Absolutely. The explanation has to make sense to the person receiving it. And then there are the practical technical hurdles. Some XAI techniques need a lot of computing power.
Ah, so scalability could be an issue.
It can be, and ironically, if the explanation process itself becomes super complex, it could almost add another layer of opacity.
Huh? Never thought of that.
Plus, IE Explore had a review focusing on trustworthy AI in banking and healthcare. It specifically flagged existing biases and vulnerabilities that XAI needs to help uncover and fix, which isn't always straightforward.
Okay, so despite the challenges, let's bring this back to the real world. Where is XAI actually making a difference now? Can we walk through some examples from the sources?
Yeah, definitely. Healthcare comes up a lot. XAI explaining medical image analysis, that's a huge help for doctors verifying what the AI sees.
Right, double-checking the machine.
In finance, clarifying those credit decisions, enhancing fairness, transparency. Autonomous vehicles, huge area. XAI explaining why the car made a specific maneuver. That's absolutely vital for safety and just for getting people to trust them.
Crucial for public acceptance, yeah.
And cybersecurity, as we mentioned. Detecting threats, mitigating attacks, boosting confidence in security systems.
And it's interesting, one source had this comparative table laying out the applications across these different fields: healthcare, finance, autonomous vehicles, cyber. It really drove home how diverse the uses are, but also the unique challenges in each area. It just reinforces how central XAI is becoming to trustworthiness everywhere. So tying it all together, ethics really seems to be at the core of this whole discussion. Using XAI to spot and fight bias, ensuring fairness. It's like an ethical check.
Definitely. And alongside that, the regulatory push is massive. Things like the EU AI Act mandating transparency for high-risk systems. It's really reinforcing that building trust isn't just a technical goal, it's about doing it responsibly, aligning with what society expects and needs.
And looking out, the sources suggest the next steps involve integrating XAI even more tightly with things like privacy protections and fairness metrics, aiming for AI systems that are trustworthy kind of holistically right from the start, transparent by design. So what's the bottom line for you listening to this? As we look towards 2025, it seems pretty clear. XAI is absolutely pivotal for trustworthy AI. It's tackling those fundamental needs around transparency, ethics, regulatory demands. Sure, challenges remain, that complexity issue, the performance balancing act, but the research is ongoing. Industry is investing, especially in making deep learning more understandable. Progress is definitely being made.
Which leads to, I think, an important question for you to consider. As AI keeps transforming everything, as it gets deeper into our lives, what's our responsibility? As users, as citizens, how much should we demand to understand the why behind AI decisions? And how might that demand, collectively shape how these powerful systems are developed and adopted in the future?